Welcome to Redeeming the Time podcast with your host, Eric Escamilla.
Well, good morning, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine.
The setup is a little different in here than the last time we talked.
Sure.
Um, I had, I had a couple questions written down for you. Do you mind if I go ahead and go into it?
No, that's fine.
I I number one just wanted to ask you how you've been feeling. How's your health? How are things going with you?
Well, I'm doing fine. 88 years takes a toll,
Yeah.
so nothing's perfect, but I'm still vertical, and so everything's fine.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Um, I was about a week ago. There was a lady that was here working on some of the computer stuff, and she had mentioned to me how from sixth grade to 12th grade, she had had a lady work with her that was from teammates. And
Mhm.
so that was one of my questions I wanted to ask you is, and number one, thank you for bringing teammates into Lincoln and Nebraska, because I've talked to more than several people that have just said it's been the greatest thing that's happened for them, coming from parents with addiction or broken families, whatever it may be. And so I just kind of was wondering what kind of is the when did that start for you, and kind of what was the idea behind it? What kind of how was it created?
Well, like most things that have been, excuse me,
That's
most things that have been meaningful in my life, my wife had something to do with it. She um, she had seen a segment of 60 Minutes on television, and there was an elderly gentleman named Eugene Lang who had been successful in the business world, and he evidently had been invited to go back to his middle school to talk to the students. And when he went back to that middle school, he was shocked because, of course, the building was now 40 years older, but it had been at one time in a fairly affluent area, and now it was in the inner city. And so when he went there, he asked the principal, said, how many of these kids do you think will ever end up going to college? And the principal said, well, if we're lucky, maybe one will go to college. And he was shocked because when he had gone to
Yeah.
school there, almost everybody went to college. And so he got up in front of the students that day. Instead of giving his prepared speech, he said, if you young people will stay out of trouble, graduate from high school, I'll pay your way to college. So Nancy was impressed by this, and she said, could we do something like that? And at that time, they weren't paying coaches quite what they pay today. And so I said, well, I don't know that we can put a elementary school or a middle school through college, but I'll see what I can do. So the next day, this was in 1991, I got in front of our football team and I said, how many of you guys would be willing to serve as a mentor to a young guy in middle school, seventh or eighth grade? 22 hands went up, and we didn't know much about what we were doing. We just said, well, I want you to meet with these kids once a week, and you can bring them to practice if you want or whatever. And then once a month, we'd get them all together, the mentors and the players and the mentees. And we'd have a speaker and have some pizza and maybe play some basketball. And my wife Nancy and a lady named Barb Hopkins, who was from the Lincoln Public Schools, kind of ran that. I was coaching wasn't always able to be there. So anyway, teammates kind of grew and evolved from that. And but the reason that this kind of resonated with me, the idea, was that when I first started coaching back in 1962, almost every player that we had on our football team was growing up with both biological parents. And as time went on, that began to change, and a lot more challenges. In 1970, the drug culture hit. We began to have to test our players, and then some of the messages that people were receiving through television, movies, whatever, were not quite as wholesome as they had been in the 60s. And so I was a little bit concerned just about what was happening with so many young people. And so teammates has evolved and grown from that point. And so today we mentor about 10,000 kids, and we have mentored over 50,000. And so good things have happened. Graduation rate for teammates, mentees from high school is around 95, 96%. And a high percentage of them go on to college. So anyway, that's just kind of a little thumbnail sketch of how it all came to be.
I didn't know half of that. And you know, the kind of the field that I'm in and that I'm working with people that have addictions. And I'm not sure how much of my background you know, but my addiction lasted 32 years. And when I talk to people, it's kind of like the similar story where in the beginning, I was kind of wondering how am I going to do this? How can I do this? And how can I help Lincoln? How can I help Nebraska? And started to watch podcasts, and I thought, you know, a podcast would probably be a pretty good idea to be able to reach more people than, you know, the two or three type of. I wanted to reach more than that, and so what had happened was I started the podcast, and the minute I started to ask people who had any form of addiction, all volunteered to want to tell their story. And I think that really encouraged me to proceed farther into it, because being in this field, addiction is a lot worse than I even thought. You know, for a minute, I'm like, okay, it's me and my friends, or, you know, maybe not that many people have a form of addiction. And so I started the podcast, and I tell you what, I think it's just amazing how many people are willing to share their story to help other people. And when I started to run into people who have the teammate experience, what I noticed was how appreciative they were, and how that seed of whatever teammates did for them, it's into their 30s, into their older part of their life, that they still remember everything that they were taught, and just the companionship, whatever they did. I think this lady had mentioned that the lady would pick her up, they'd go out to eat, they'd kind of do something. And so I thought, you know what, that's a pretty special thing that teammates does this and still exists, and it sounds like it's pretty successful, and I appreciate you for doing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we have touched a lot of lives, and we've had a lot of good things happen.
You know, I had another question. Kind of, I was kind of wondering, in this field that I'm in, what kind of advice would you give me? You know, I'm sober 5 years, and I know July 20th was my 5th year anniversary. And, you know, in addiction, if you can get to the first day, you know, and just keep piling up those days, the first year seems to be the toughest, in my opinion. The second year, I had a question of why did I have this addiction in for so long? I hurt so many people, relationships, friends. And so the deep dive into the second and third year for me, I found the reasons why. And what I've learned is that the majority of addiction comes from a pain or trauma. And so that's why I think the teammates is so impactful, is because the mentors can take some of that pain and that hurt that the child or the young person is going through and really help them in their life. And so as I figured out the pain and traumas in my life, the fourth and fifth year was just really putting it all together. And so those 5 years have been very educational for me. But sometimes it's okay to get advice. It is good advice from people who, from the outside looking in, could possibly share some type of advice to me in this journey that I'm on. Because I plan to do this the rest of my life, helping people and sharing my story. There's a lot of details in it. But I think, like I said, if a person can get to that pain and the trauma, and that was the toughest part, because you have to be honest with yourself. And if you can take yourself to that point, that's where I found that the healing started. And once that healing started, that process, obviously at 5 years now, has taken some time to get to where I'm at. And I think that I'm at the point where I'm healed enough to where I can now help people. And so I just thought I would ask, from your standpoint and kind of what I'm doing, what kind of advice would you share?
Well, I've known you for a while now, Eric, and I don't remember when we first met, but it might have been your
Eight
first or
years
second,
ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
So you were still in the
I was
mess
deep. I
at
was
that
deep. Yeah.
time. Yeah. So I didn't realize it had been that long. But I just think that having been there, having experienced the problems of addiction, you're better able to relate to people who are going through a similar experience, and the fact that you're willing to be vulnerable and to let people know that you at one time were there, and these were the reasons that affected your life, and walk along with them. I think makes a difference, and I think it's always inspirational that people who are going through a difficult time to see someone who's been there, done that, and has emerged on the other side of it in a better place. Doesn't mean that you're perfect, doesn't mean that you have no problems, but you're able to overcome that. And I think the idea that using the podcast format has enabled you to reach more people, and that's been a good thing. So I'm sure that you've had a very positive impact on lots of people, and I admire you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was probably about 2 weeks into treatment. Um, and I think when it comes to treatment, I think that has to be a point for someone that they want to do that. I know people that's been in treatment 4 or 5 different times. But I knew that when I went to treatment, it I wanted to do that. And it was probably about 2 weeks in, and I was talking to a doctor there, and I had mentioned to him, I said, you know what, I want to do this. I'm going to do something to help people. And I'm kind of the type of person that I think bigger than I probably should. But I felt that the impact that I wanted to bring to people was a lot of people, not just a few people, although one is very important. And so this was just kind of the way that I feel I can reach people. And again, for me, it's the focus on Lincoln and the focus on Nebraska, because I think if there's something that I could do to help people, give them advice, they can help me. I think that seed that I plant can eventually kind of spread out and people start to hear it and build a community that actually can be of great support for everybody. And, I think when I first started this, also because alcohol and drugs were my main addiction, I think people sometimes take the podcast and go, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, or, oh, I don't use drugs type of thing, right? But, it was interesting because when I Googled different types of addiction, it gave me 30 addictions that had nothing to do with alcohol. And the other night I was listening to a lecture, and the number one addiction right now has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. It's pornography. And I was like, which just amazes me, because then it goes back to our youth. Everybody has a cell phone, and the access to that is so easy. And then the second thing was online gambling. And I'm thinking that, so everything's kind of been skewed to an addiction being someone who is stumbling, drinking, smoking marijuana, whatever it be. But there's a list of other addictions that need to be brought out, given some attention to. And that's my goal. The podcast will have all the addictions. Eating is an addiction, shopping is an addiction, social media is an addiction, and there are so many things. And so that's kind of what I want to be able to share. It's not just about drugs and alcohol. And I think that what happens with our youth, and I feel horrible, because when I look around and I see the youth and they're getting caught up in this stuff, it starts at such a young age. It starts with just something small, and then it gets bigger and bigger. But a lot of times at that young age, they don't realize really why and what they're doing. And obviously for me, I was 51, 52 when I realized this. So when it comes to the addiction part, I think people kind of start to feel comfortable with the fact that, it's one beer, two beer a night type of thing, or I only drink on the weekend. But from my experience, anything that I did started just like that. And and I can guarantee you, with my kids, I have 5 boys and 1 girl, as you know, it affected every one of them, because what they saw dad do, they did. And so the 5 years of sobriety, the greatest reward that I have right now is the fact that my kids see it. They want to try to live it because they see the new me. And I think that, so when we just do something at a small portion, even family environment, whatever it be, dinner, whatever it be, it's never just one or two. Eventually it's a little bit more. Well, we're having a party here, we're having a wedding, game day. It is what it is, because the game day was the biggest day for me, right? And so as we continue to do this, the kids see it. And I think that that's what's important. And I think, like with my daughter, she probably has seen more of my sobriety than any of the boys did. But I've had my boys just say, thank you, Dad. You're a lot more calmer. I'm content, and I'm not so high strung, and I'm not, I don't have an addiction. And when they see that, they have a different visual on parents. And so that's why I really feel for the kids, because kids who come from addiction, parents don't change, or a broken family, that's when we really have to do what Teammates is doing, hopefully do what I'm doing, can reach to the youth that it's probably not the best route to go, you know. And again, with my daughter, it's a different communication that I have with her because she listens, she she wants to learn, and the reward is the kids come out better in the long run. And I think that that's been important and been a pretty good experience for me, is that a lot of times we think we're sober, that there should be something uh, we should be rewarded with. And I think if parents, adults look at the situation, for me, my biggest reward was my kids just loving me, especially in a different way, appreciating our time together. It's more quality time. Um, and so that's why I brought up the Teammates, is because I was like, you know what, lately especially, I've really had a lot of compassion, empathy, and interest in the fact that, you know what, it's our kids that we need to focus on as well as ourselves, but that the kids really need to start seeing better examples of us as adults.
I think that what you're saying is that there's always a ripple effect, and it certainly impacts your family. It affects people you interact with, and it can be a positive ripple or it can be a negative ripple.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen both sides of that. And so I'm glad that it's had a positive impact on your kids. I remember when we first met that you were struggling with your family relationships and your children were a concern to you. And glad to hear that maybe things are working out better now for you.
Yeah, and you know, that transition into being sober, there's a lot of questions that the kids had for themselves, and they had to get used to me, the new me, because they were so used to this person that I was. So it's being patient, because the kids are used to this negative dynamic from that ripple effect. And so what it ends up happening is that you almost got to bring them alongside you so they can see the growth and that you can grow together, because they're confused. They're just as confused of why dad was drinking or why was dad smoking. I mean, these types of things now he doesn't. It's kind of like, well, I do it now. He did it. And so there's a different type of confusion, but a better type, if that makes sense, because it's a positive. And so that's what's happened with my kids, is that they see that. And of course, now there was pain and trauma from what I brought into the picture with the kids, that me at where I'm at, putting seeds in them so that they can kind of see that their growth into not doing what I did for as long as I did would help them and make them better people. And that's what I'm slowly seeing. And of course, my oldest is 30, and I'm barely seeing that now from him.
Mhm.
The 21-year-old, he's growing into that. They're seeing it, but they just love me differently than what they did before, and I'm more present and with them to help them along the way.
That's a good thing to hear.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, it nothing that I'm doing, even working with other people, is necessarily easy, but there's some gratification, because it's nice to see people smile again. It's nice to see people a little bit more motivated, see the positive side of it. And so that's kind of my goal, is just to make this a new type of revolution for Lincoln and Nebraska, and bring a lot more of the sober world back, if that's possible.
Mhm. Right.
So I'm
Well,
I'm, I'm trying.
I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. it's encouraging to me to see, because I remember back when, and struggles you're having, and it doesn't mean that you don't have any struggles, but they're different kind of struggles, and they're certainly a lot healthier than they were at that time.
Well, and I won't go long into this, but sometimes as a sober person, the struggle is to see people who are even family, who are Christians and faith background, believe in God, which I do, and I think you and I both know that that's probably the main reason this has happened. But the tough thing for me is to see people that don't see it, and they are those people of faith, and they don't feel like they have that addiction. That's kind of been my struggle. But at the same time, again, that's where prayer comes in, right? and just doing the best I can to be an example. But yeah, that's probably a pretty tough challenge for me right now, is seeing the outside of close people to me that don't realize and are kind of stubborn to the addictions, you know. But that's part of it, I believe. Part of
Yeah.
the journey.
Well, I think people are ready to listen at different points in their life. And unfortunately, there are a few that never get to that point. But
Yeah, I
uh,
think it's more so now. I've really I'm starting to see this turn to more of that positive in the community, is
mhm,
that they really see the despair of what any type of addiction can do, because no addiction is going to be a positive outcome ever. I've never seen it. And
mhm,
so I start to see people be more aware of the fact that, man, I need to stop doing this or that. And
mhm,
just the way society, the way the world is, from money, the little things, food, whatever it be, people are really suffering. And I think what suffering does is it brings us back to self, and to be more aware and realize that we need to do something, and it's more likely, hopefully, going to be more for the positive and the better.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and you certainly have made it a positive turn. I guess I can speak to that from having met you many years ago and
Hmm.
seeing where you are now. And it's been a good journey for you.
And I appreciate everything you did. I all the texts, I got to admit in the beginning I was afraid to answer the phone. I was in my addictions though. And I think the fact that you were just persistent always gave me good advice. And I stuck with everything you told me, and I did it. And I think that just helped me much more. But I was in the dumps when I met you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Definitely. And so,
yeah,
Tom, I just really, really appreciate everything you've done for me. Thank you for teammates. And I think that anytime, anything I can do, that would be something that I could contribute to teammates in any way. From what I'm doing on the podcast side of it, I have the podcast is a seed for what I plan to do in the future. And so I have a couple big plans ahead. I won't bring those up, but I'm more than willing to, in any way that I can contribute, that I'd be more than willing to do that. And I really appreciate what you've done for me. And I'm an example that it works.
well, the thing that I'm grateful for is to see the person that you have become, and the fact that you're trying to reach out to other people is always very gratifying. And so good luck on your journey, and keep on keeping on.
And I will for sure. But before we leave, I always like to end with a little, This wasn't planned out, as we know, but today's Ava's birthday. She's 15 years old.
Oh,
So she
mhm.
turned 15 today. And I asked her, I said, would there be a question you'd want me to ask Tom for you? And she goes, She wasn't sure. But then she goes, okay. She goes, can you ask Tom what is the best advice he has ever been given?
Well, Ava may have stumped me, but I
She stumped me.
suppose,
I was pretty proud of her.
yeah. But please give Ava my regards, and I guess the best advice I've been given is to try to be true to yourself, and to I think there's really three dimensions of human experience. There's the physical dimension, the intellectual dimension, and the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And probably to develop in all three areas is important.
Mm.
So my spiritual walk has certainly been very important to me, and I think to my family and to others I've known. So I would hope that people would be cognizant of the fact that spirituality, faith in something more important than yourself is critical.
Yes.
And I see the struggle right now in our culture where lots of people have abandoned their faith, and it often leads to very dire circumstances. So anyway, I guess that's one thing you might pass on, David, just
Definitely.
to have a good spiritual life. And please wish her well for me.
Yes, I will. I believe, and thank you very much for that. And I will definitely tell her. Um, I think we got about just about 2 or 3 minutes, Tom. So here's a short. Give me a short answer, real quick. So my question is what is your favorite food of all time?
Oh, really? I eat quite a bit of salmon
Okay.
because it's healthy for you. I like it. But it's also, I had some cardiovascular issues with my heart. Salmon is one of the better foods to have. A lot of other things you can eat that aren't very good for you. So that's one of my favorites.
Like that, the chocolate swirl, vanilla swirl ice cream yogurt, right?
That's right.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate your time, taking out time to visit with me, and
Glad to do
I
it.
really appreciate it. Things are going a lot better. Things are going good, and I will keep you and your family in my prayers. And I ask that you do the same for me, because I know I need it. But yeah, and just the last note, we got about a minute left. I got 9-3 for the Huskers, possible 11-1, and that's my hope.
You're right. And uh, I think I think 9-3 is reasonable. But I think Matt Rule is doing a good job. Culture's good.
Yep.
I talked to the players a couple of weeks ago, and they look the part.
Yeah.
A lot of kids that look like great players. So we'll hope for the best.
Yep.
But
And this new generation is a little bit different than what we're used to. But I tell you what, I that you're right. They look solid. Everybody looks like they're working together, and Matt Rule is definitely doing a good job. So, but Tom, I appreciate you a lot, and thank you very much for being on here with me.
thanks, Eric.
All
All the
right,
best to you and best to your family.
all right, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
have a good day.
Bye.
All right,
Mhm.
bye bye.